Hello, my name is Megan. I use she or they pronouns. And I'm so excited to be here today representing as the River Network emerging leader and teaching this workshop. Can I get the slides up, please, Carly? Excellent, thank you. Okay, cool. Next slide, please. So maybe you haven't used Zoom a lot, or this is like your millionth call, but just some logistics. This works best if you are in gallery mode. So in the top right corner, you should see a button that says gallery mode. Also, hot tip, you can hit view options above and go to side by side mode. So you can see like the screen and people's faces side by side versus just in the little top bar. That's my favorite viewing mode. Next, please. Okay, and we're going to use, we're going to be speaking to each other later today. So if you know how to unmute or mute yourself, let's all demonstrate we know how to use that by unmuting ourselves and saying hello to each other.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Wow, it's so nice to hear your voices and know that there's actually people out there. It's so cool. It's a little weird, like I'm in this room talking to a screen, but it's nice to be able to connect. And then if you do feel comfortable showing your video, would love to see your faces because, you know, we'll be sharing stories, and yeah, it's just easier to connect face to face, or somewhat face to face. And then, yeah, the chat function is there for you to use. Definitely use that and introduce yourself. We'll be doing that in the next slide, actually, Carly. So I'd like to do a small land acknowledgement. I am calling in from Sacramento, California, also known as Nisenan land. And the Nisenan people are still here alive today, but they went through a lot when Western settlers came through this area in seek of gold and completely destroyed the environment and the rivers. And so by acknowledging them today, we're recognizing their indigenous sovereignty and like just bringing them to the forefront of our minds, and knowing that if we are not indigenous to this land, we are visitors, and we are still living on their unceded stolen land. So it's important for us to recognize that. So if you know your native land, please drop that in the chat and recognize that indigenous tribe today. And if you don't know, check out this handy website, native-land.ca. I will drop a link in the chat for you to check it out. So you should do that. Okay, I'm seeing Kevin is in Alaska. Do you know your native land, perhaps? Let's see here. Shikori land, thank you, Hannah. Harley, Arapaho land, thank you very much. And hopefully more folks will look up their address and type in their land. Nice, thank you, Kirsten, Comox Nation. Awesome. Okay, keep them coming, y'all. We're just gonna keep moving on. Next slide, please. All right, so feel free to rename yourself with your name, your pronouns, and your location so that we refer to each other, we know what's going on. But I think it's just like good practice to have these. Yeah, and then I'll put my location too. Okay, so while you're doing that, I guess I'll give a little intro to who I am. This workshop, Storytelling in Resonance, is from our Sunrise Movement trainings. And the Sunrise Movement is a movement of young people dedicated to stopping climate change and create millions of good jobs in the process. And we're currently mobilizing across the entire country to elect Green New Deal champions who will put the livelihoods and well-beings of all people at the center of justice in legislation and fighting for us, basically. So one way we do that is through storytelling, and we're gonna get through that just a little bit, but next slide. I have a few requests for everybody before we jump into this content. So to maximize our time together, I ask you to be present, and that could look like removing distractions, closing tabs, to the best of your ability. But if you really need to answer that email or take that phone call, please go do that and then come back so that you can, when you're in the space, you're fully present and able to participate. Get a beverage, maybe you're sipping coffee or tea, but just definitely do whatever you gotta do to take care of yourself. Get note-taking stuff if that's helpful for you today. We're gonna be teaching a new concept, I think, for a lot of people, which is resonance. So if you wanna take notes on that, that is helpful. And center yourself. The reason why we're doing this is I feel like to connect with each other. And it's so easy for us to lose sight of that, especially in COVID and we're in quarantine. But I think hearing our stories is just so like valuable and so precious and such a gift every time I hear someone's story. Okay, next slide. And then, yeah, just a brief overview of what we're going to do today. We're in the opening. We are ahead of time, so that's excellent. That'll be more time for us to practice later. So we just did the introductions. Now we're going to go into our main content. And then we're hoping to end within an hour with the main content, but I will stick around for the after if you want to practice more on your story or ask any questions. So that's optional. Okay, are there any questions? If not, give me a thumbs up that you heard all that. So thank you. I'm seeing some thumbs. Great. Okay. Now I'm going to tell you my story. If we could turn off screen share. All right. Okay. So my name is Megan, and my family immigrated to the US as refugees from the Vietnam War. They escaped. And so I grew up in Sacramento. I am the first person in my family to go to college, really the first person to learn English as my first language. And I didn't go camping or hiking a lot with my family because we just didn't have the knowledge or the money to do these things. But what I do remember is going fishing with my dad and also playing in the American River near Sacramento. And I was probably around 7 years old at the time. And we went to the river. I remember it being like hot and swimming and having a good time, making sandcastles in the beach. And there was this giant ice cream boat. Like I've never seen anything like that before. I've seen like an ice cream truck, but it was basically a boat and they were playing music and selling ice cream. And I was so excited. I was like, this is so cool. I love ice cream. And I remember ordering a root beer float because I was obsessed with root beer at the time. I drank a lot of soda. But yeah, I don't remember a lot from my childhood, but I remember that day being outside and just eating ice cream and with my family. And fast forward to college, I decided to study environmental science because I felt like I really connected with being outside. I always had so much fun and I had a lot of energy as a kid, like whether I was playing sports, I was constantly outside. And I studied environmental science at UC Davis. And there weren't a lot of people of color in my classes. I don't even think we had a person of color teaching this study, science either. And during times where we would get together and get to know our classmates and hang out, I recall conversations where people would be talking about their latest outdoor adventure. Like, oh, I just came back from backpacking in Yosemite or some remote place. And those conversations always made me feel left out. I already felt like I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me in class. And when they talked about these experiences, I felt like I didn't have anything to offer. And there was this weird weird competition almost, where people would say like, oh, you went there, well, I went here. And this continuation of just like being felt like being pushed further and further outside of this circle. But yeah, that didn't feel really good. And but then I ended up taking this class called eco-geomorphology, which sounds like a made up word because it is. It's a combination of ecology, geology, and then morphology. And it was this experiential class where they took us to the river and taught us about the river. And we actually went whitewater rafting down the South Fork American River. I've never done whitewater rafting before, but I've always loved water sports. I did this sport called dragon boat. I don't know if any of you know what that is, but that was my experience on boating. And any excuse to be outside, I was like, yes, let's do this. And it was sponsored by a school, so it was an amazing experience. And I remember going on the river and learning about all the different fish species, being able to identify different trees. Like birds weren't just birds anymore. Rocks weren't just rocks. They were like pillow basalt and granite and cottonwoods and salmon and rainbow trout. Like I felt like my eyes were opened up to this whole new world. Like I had this new lens where I could see and experience the world. And I loved it so much that I became a whitewater rafting guide myself. And I started taking people out to the river and sharing what I learned with them. And now I'm that person with that cool story. Like, oh yeah, well, I'm a whitewater rafting guide too. And I have these really great experiences outside. And I wanted to continue sharing this new appreciation for the rivers. And so I found a career in science communication. I've taught first grade environmental science. That was a really fun experience. Kids are so great at learning. And I work in conservation now. And, you know, climate change is definitely a huge topic we talk about in the science community. But it wasn't until I started organizing with Sunrise that I realized how deeply intertwined climate justice is related to racial justice. Like I thought I was a good environmental scientist and an environmental advocate, but I had no idea like how wrong I was. Climate change is not going to be solved by taking shorter showers. They're not going to be solved by bringing my reusable bag to the grocery store or saying no to the plastic straw from Starbucks. It's so much more than that. And so organizing with Sunrise was the most immediate and best thing I could do to like make change, to make bold change, bold leadership, because people are losing their lives. They're losing their homes to the catastrophic wildfires in California, to the point where I couldn't even go outside for weeks without breathing toxic smoke. And I'm realizing that we need to do more. And I'm bringing my new lens of justice, the same way I learned how rivers worked. I'm bringing that new understanding to the work that I'm doing today in conservation. And I feel like, I guess that's the intersection here with this group, with River Network folks, is we are all leaders in water conservation and we all know the science. But I think this new lens that we're applying and learning is this lens of justice. And I'm still on my learning journey, and I hope that we can all join in together to fight for climate action and a Green New Deal. That's my story.
Thank you, Megan, so much for sharing. Yeah, can we get some love for Megan in the chat? And yeah, I just wanted to say too, I felt like I was right there with you when you talked about science opening up your eyes to what needs to be addressed. I really felt that. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Carly. And thanks for all the love in the chat. I appreciate that. So, what we just did was an example of storytelling and resonating. So I told my story, and then Carly said, I was right there with you when you said. So that's an example of resonating. And can we get the slides up, please? Yeah. Oh, wait, actually, hold on. Before we do the slides, I want to share exactly why we do storytelling and resonating. So you've seen what it happens. Now let's talk about why we tell stories and resonate with each other. So raise your hand or type a 5 in the chat if you're not on camera. If you've ever been on a large Zoom call or recall back to times where we could meet in person, you were in a large room and you felt invisible or detached or just like not engaged. Oh yeah, I'm seeing a lot of hands. Thank you. I know I have, and it's good to feel not alone. And so, especially now when we're in an age of like a pandemic and we're first forced to social distance and everything is virtual through a screen, it feels so hard to find connection because I know I'm personally struggling. It's so easy to just tune out, like you're just a face on the screen. I don't know who you are. And I haven't been able to hug my friends recently or see anyone, and it just feels like so isolating. And we live in a culture today where it's so fast paced. We turn on the screen and read the news, and it's just so overwhelming. And it's so easy to disconnect and feel detached. And so raise your hand if you feel like you like to be listened to. And it feels good when you like talk to your friends, right? Okay, thank you. Like, yeah, so that is what resonating and storytelling is like. We all like to be listened to, and when we don't get listened to, it's hard to process our pain, our stories, our struggles, or even our joy. And most of the time, then it just becomes another, story to fill the massive space that's already being taken up by so much going on. And so the point of storytelling is so that we can reach and appeal to people through our hearts. Like, we're in an age where you can tell people facts and they won't care. If it's like against whatever their beliefs are, you're not going to reach them. But our last hope is to reach people through their emotions, appeal to them as a human. And that's how we're going to enact change, because the people who stand to keep us divided will keep winning if they keep us isolated. But together we're stronger, and we can, there's like, I really believe in people power, and that's how we can elevate each other in our stories. Okay, that's storytelling. And then resonating is one way we show people we're with them. And I'm going to teach you new strategies to show people you're with them, that don't take away from their story. Okay, so let's get the slides back up. Okay, so resonating is listening with your whole heart and sharing moments you are right there with the storyteller. And some very useful sentence structures to show resonance is saying, I was really there when. We're all going to say that together off mute on 3. Ready? On 3. 1, 2, 3.
I was
really there when.
Excellent. Thank you. And then we're going to say, I felt it in my body when, on 3. 1, 2, 3.
I felt it in my body when.
Thank you. Excellent. Yeah, so these are really helpful sentences for you to show that you're with that speaker. Resonating is not, click next slide, please. Okay. Resonating is not interpreting. So if you refer back to my story, resonating is not saying, oh, from your story, Megan, it sounded like you felt, it's hard to resonate to your own story. Okay, so there was a, then this training is usually taught by 2 other people and another trainer. So yeah, resonating is just not interpreting like, oh, from your story, it sounded like you were depressed when you talked about being alone. Like, I didn't say the word depressed, so don't interpret my word. What you could have said was, I felt it in my body when you talked about feeling left out of the group. Okay. Resonating is not telling your own story. I think this is common practice when we maybe talk to a close friend or someone we just know, to show that we had similar experiences and connecting with them. But then you're making that story about you and you're taking it away from them. So resonating in this sense could be, instead of saying like, oh, that reminds me of time when I went whitewater rafting. That's not resonating. Resonating is also not asking questions. I think we're taught early that asking questions shows that you're an active listener and you want to know more. But I really want us to get into the practice of honoring that space of whatever they offer and not asking more, because sometimes a story can be very personal and vulnerable, and you don't want to pry and like take more than they're willing to give. However, if you are really close with them and later you want to ask and you have a burning questions, I think that's fine. It depends on the case. But like, if you're really meeting someone for the first time, I would really challenge you to like be in the present and resonate. Resonating is also not giving advice. It's, you really, like, for me, it should have been like, if someone said like, oh, you could have joined a bunch of clubs to go outside. I know like colleges offer a bunch of clubs to go outside. Like, that is not the point of the story. And so you're missing the mark by giving advice. And sometimes when you receive unsolicited advice, it just doesn't feel good. You're like, no one asked you, so no need to do that. And then resonating is not one-upping. You don't want to say like, oh, you did whitewater rafting, you're a guide, well, I'm also a guide, I'm also like a rock climber, I'm also like whatever, like these things, that doesn't help. And then one downing, you don't want to say things like, oh, that must have been so hard for you to go through college feeling so alone. I think one downing is like a newish term, even when I learned it, but it's just like making someone's journey feel like it just takes away like their effort. You're kind of like downplaying it. And if you find yourself doing any of these, don't worry. I think it takes a lot of practice, and if you catch yourself doing it, that also means you're paying attention, so that's a good thing. Are there any questions about resonating, what it is, what it isn't?
What if my first whitewater rafting was also on the American River in Sacramento?
Yeah. I think like in a conversation with a friend, you could totally, follow up after, you kind of share your story. But another way to show people that you're with them is nonverbal cues. So like when people are talking, you can be nodding, you can be like, like these kind of things. But again, I challenge you to say like, to honor people's story and not insert yourself into their narrative. Because by saying like, oh, I did whitewater rafting on the South American River too, you make it about yourself. Yeah. but I also think that's really cool. So I think it's just like a practice of it's so different than how we're normally have a conversation with each other where it's a lot of back and forth. This is really like sitting and like listening fully. And I think that is the challenge here. Any other questions? Yeah, Hannah, these points about resonating is making me think about how I've been taught empathy. Interesting. Hannah, would you like to come off mute and share a little bit more?
Yeah, like I feel like sometimes we're taught like in order to empathize with people, we ask questions or we share about like a time that we've had a similar experience. And sharing, when you were sharing what resonating is not, it made me think about how, like, think twice about some of those like techniques that we're told are like active listening or empathizing with someone. Maybe it's not actually empathizing, maybe that's putting ourselves at the center of someone else's story.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hannah, for sharing. I went through the same experience, like kind of relearning the way I think about how I show empathy to others. And I think when you are doing all these things about like, oh, like they said something, it brought up something of my memory. You stop listening to them. You're thinking about yourself. You're distracted by your own thoughts. And so by fully trying to resonate, you are fully present and listening to the story and not letting any other thoughts come in about yourself. So yeah, thanks for sharing, Hannah. Okay, so if there aren't any other questions, now it's your turn to practice. We're gonna give everybody a few minutes to brainstorm this prompt that we have, Carly. And the prompt is, what is a moment you felt strong emotions due to recent event? And then bonus follow-up question is, how did you direct this energy to throw down for climate justice or for your organization? And I really challenge you to dig deep about like how you're feeling that day. Do a body scan. Were you tense anywhere? Did you have a conversation with a friend? What feelings popped up for you? And we picked this question because I just feel like no one joins an environmental conservation organization to make money. Like we're all in it to like because we care. So I'm sure there's something out there that is causing you to care and like continue to do this work. So what is that? Let's do maybe 3 minutes, 2 minutes on the clock. And then we'll break out into groups and y'all can practice on each other. And don't worry, your story doesn't have to be perfect, but I challenge you to dig deep and dig vulnerable. I'll play some music for y'all. Carly, can you take off screen share, please? Okay. So a few more minutes. We'll go till like 10:35. I think if you're struggling to come up with a story, I think that's okay. Maybe an easier question is like, why did you show up today? Or why did you join the organization you are? Everybody has that story, I think. And just speak from the heart. I think this practice is about just being honest and speaking from the heart about how we feel, because I think that is not something that is fostered like I feel like in meetings or when I'm at work, we talk about, all right, here's the agenda. We're gonna get through X, Y, Z, business only. That's it. And and then on the other side, it's like when we have virtual happy hours, it's like, how's it going? How are you holding up? What'd you do today? There's these, it's either questions about business or it's like questions about what you did this weekend. And I feel like we miss those moments where we dig deep into like, what's going on with you? Or like, what's your story? What's that deeper story? So if you're struggling, that's okay. I maybe just a story about how you feeling, why you continue to do the work you do today in your organization, why you showed up today, anything. Just speak from the heart is my one request. Okay, so let's break you out into breakout groups. We're gonna do 15 minutes, 5 minutes each. Groups of 3. First person will tell their story. Let's do about 3 minutes. And then the other 2 people will do 2 minutes of resonating. Okay, and then you'll switch. We will try to keep time in your group. So designate a timekeeper, please. And we'll also give you prompts as well. But yeah, any questions about that? Give me a thumbs up if you understand, or an okay in the chat. Okay, cool. All right, Carly, please break us out into groups and we'll see you in 15. Did you close the rooms, Carly? How did it feel to share your story and have others resonate with you? Type it in the chat or come off mute and share.
For me, I noticed how important silence is in this practice and not feeling the need to fill space.
Wow, thanks for sharing, Hannah. I really love what you said about silence, because I used to be that person where like, I don't like silence, so I'm gonna fill it up. But then you ended up taking so much space and you don't let other people like step in. And so I think sitting in that discomfort of silence is where we show growth. I think discomfort is growth. And so by being uncomfortable, it's okay. Like over time, you'll be like, yeah, it creates a space for other people to step in. So thank you for sharing that, Hannah. Does anyone else want to share? What did it feel like, yeah, to resonate, to use I felt it in my body when?
Hannah told a story, and it wasn't so much that I related to her specific story as much as related to her reaction to what was going on. She said she had a very visceral reaction to something, and I myself have had visceral reactions to things, so because she said that, I could feel myself how she felt about that moment, about what was going on, without having to be in her whole story with the topic she was talking about.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Beth. Like, definitely, like, kind of just being out of your body, but also like in your body, like it's just experiencing everything going on, but being fully present with the speaker. Thanks for sharing, Beth. Yeah, I see Kevin says a little embarrassing and uncomfortable, enlightening. Yeah. Oh, thanks, Rose, for joining. See ya. So yeah, next bullet. I guess this is yeah, thanks for sharing how it felt like storytelling and resonating. Again, I wanted to say like this may not be the right thing you use for all your future conversations. Like you don't want to just sit in silence when your best friend is telling you like some hot goss, you know, like I was really right there when you got that weird text. No, like that's not the right context. It's more of like really talking to new people and really, or when you're talking, you're trying to make change or really connect with someone. This is when you pull out the resonating. But yeah, like I guess with that in mind, like how do you see yourself using storytelling and resonating in your work with your organization or the continued fight in environmental justice? Does anyone want to share off mute or on chat? Maybe let's hear from Leslie, Maya, Irene, anyone?
I'll share. I
Okay.
am a social worker, not an environmentalist. I work with an environmental company. So I agree with silence and resonance. Absolutely. I think I'm just kind of having a hard time wrapping my brain around a few other things, such as the need to validate people's experience. And I think the audience absolutely is most important, because everyone needs something different based on their own experience. You know, some person may just want silence and another person may, you know, desire that validation. Maybe they've been invalidated by someone else and so they are seeking validation. And so, and the other thing I just kind of have is, and this could be my own thing, but saying I feel it in my body. And maybe that's because I work with people, various kinds of people. And so again, I think audience and knowing who you're talking to and what environment you're in is absolutely the most important thing. But thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing, Leslie. That is a very important point you're making, and that, yeah, audience is key in knowing what, yeah, how this is not appropriate for every situation. It's just an extra tool in our communications toolbox that we can use at any time. But yeah, especially if in social work with a lot of, yeah, it's a lot going on there. So thank you so much for sharing. I guess this is coming from more of like an environmental, when we're like relating with each other about like environmental justice. I think that's a good tool, but yeah, definitely use with discretion and caution. But that is a very valuable point you're making. So thank you for sharing. Irene says, this is amazing. I'm phoning with deep canvassing and this will be passed on. People's action. One person talked about sacrifice zones in Wisconsin to me yesterday. Excellent. Thanks for sharing, Irene. Okay, well, it looks like we're 2 minutes over the hour. I just wanted to end by saying thank you so much for joining. I know we all have busy lives, and 1 hour a day is a lot of time to donate to someone. And so thank you so much. I hope that we all can, you know, tell our stories to the world and continuing doing the great work that we all do, whether that's in social work, whether that's for the environment, and just continue connecting with each other, because especially during these strange times, it's so easy to feel connected, and it just pushes us further and further and polarizes to these different ends. And we're seeing that in the, you know, the way the election plays out. So yeah, thanks again. I'll be sticking around if you have any questions or you want to workshop your story. But otherwise, I'll let you go. Let's turn take ourselves off mute and say goodbye to each other. And yeah.
Bye-bye. See you
Bye.
later.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.